Hi, everybody. Some of you I haven't met yet because you're new to our program. My name's Mary Alice Moore. I'm the class coordinator. So I handle a lot of the behind the scenes registrar-esque stuff as far as getting people into LearnZap with what they need and yada yada and all of that good stuff. So if there's anything administrative help wise that you need, feel free to holler at me. Slack is usually best for reaching out to me. Yeah. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Frank. A few people know me. I say Ian knows me, but probably most don't. So I'm a Coda Dream for about a year and a half. I work in both sides, the classes side, so the regular classes, the practicum. I kind of run theoretically practicum, but Mary Alice runs it, but I kind of run it maybe. I also work with the apprentices on career development. Also work on some the lab side of application development as well.
Cool, cool. And he makes everybody laugh too. So if you need a good laugh, raise your
Sometimes,
hand.
yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and dig in a little bit, so that way we can be respectful of your time because I know we're starting a little bit late from follow-up from the student orientation. So we'll knock out our slides here, answer any questions along the way. Feel free to unmute and holler at us if you have questions, or you can type things in the chat if that's easier or more convenient for you or whatever. And of course, we'll stick around at the end for any burning questions that don't get answered. Okay, so practicum structure for those of you that are new, we have React graduates and Node graduates, and we have some combination of that making up each group. We tell students to shoot for 3 React students to 2 Node students, but obviously graduation rates can fluctuate. So there will be a minimum of at least 1 Node student in every group. Your group might have a couple dual enrollers in it. I think we have at least one team that has 2 or 3 students within the group that took and graduated out of both React and a Node this term. So you might have sort of a blended team, as it were. But all of your teams should have either 5 or 6 students as a part of them, and you will be mentoring those teams. So you don't have to worry about anybody else other than your 5 or 6 students within your team. That kind of gives you a quick highlight of the practicum structure for how we're set up there. This primary student goals, so what students should be focusing on as they're working their way through practicum is building on their learning from the class, stretching out of their comfort zone a little bit, strengthen weak skills, all of those good things. Cooperate, collaborate, and communicate. Communicate is going to be the biggest one that we try and really emphasize. Please try and continue to emphasize that throughout the practicum. If we don't hear from people, it creates all kinds of frustration and aggravation. So encouraging communication and making us aware if somebody is being non-communicative, whether that's a co-mentor or a student or Frank, because he can be that way sometimes. No, just kidding. Um, let us know if there is somebody that is supposed to be part of your team that you're not hearing from. They should be learning about workflow process, agile, scrum, stand-up, so mimic as much of what your experience has been in the industry in your team so they can get a feel for what that's like. Get comfortable using project management devices. Each team might have their druthers, their preferences as far as whether they want to do GitHub projects, Trello, or something different. So it's okay if they want to use something other than GitHub projects specifically. And that's totally fine for them to do. Feel free to support them and or let us know if you need additional support if it's a area that you're unfamiliar with or a tool that you haven't been using, to be able to get you what you need so you can support your team. They should get an idea of how projects are managed from concept through build, through testing, through deployment, and what that looks and feels like from start to finish. So if they join a team that is at any point of those, then they have an idea of what's going on there. They should see and experience how merge conflicts are handled. You all will be administrators on the repositories that house their front and back ends. So whenever merge conflicts arise, make sure that this is something that students are seeing how that process is being handled. They should also be learning about code review and start dabbling in pair programming or getting comfortable in reviewing each other's code, since that might also be a task that's given them in the industry. At the end of the first 8 weeks, they will do a demo night on Friday, September 13th in the evening Eastern time to be able to work as a group and talk about their project as a group to demonstrate what has been built, get a little sample of what it's like to, prototype that for a client or whatnot. And they should complete and deploy a simple app. It's not uncommon for teams to try and fit all of the things in. So that's where your experience and guidance will be extremely helpful to make sure that they aren't taking on more than is realistic for an 8-week time period. At the end, new this curriculum. So if you're returning to us from a previous practicum mentorship, then new this time around at the end, after those first 8 weeks of project build are done, they'll have a 2-week period where they're working on career development. So the final 2 weeks, instead of having a meeting and working through their project with them, then you'll just be facilitating discussion amongst the team about specific activities and content that they're provided with in relation to career development, as far as building resumes, handling technical interviews. All of that content you all should be able to see. I'm going to drop the link to the curriculum in the chat now. Please let me know if you cannot access this page and or the lessons within that calendar. But that, go ahead and bookmark it, is your source of truth for the curriculum that we provide students and what they should be working on from week to week throughout the practicum portion. And those weeks 9 and 10 will give you an idea of what information we're sharing with them in regards to career development and career prep, and what activities they should do to kind of start talking about it, start getting comfortable, networking, review, all that good stuff, practice interviewing, that kind of thing. Okay.
I say,
Yeah, I was gonna say, Frank, jump in, or if there are questions up
okay.
to this point.
Can you go back one slide?
Absolutely.
Cool. So since everybody here pretty much hasn't mentored a practicum before, but obviously has mentored the advanced or intro classes. So mentoring practicum is obviously going to be a little bit different. You'll be kind of like, guiding the students in tasks and ideas and patterns that they haven't done before. Obviously, like thinking about a project as something new as far as what they're going to build. Working like, in like an agile scrum type of structure is new to them. Figuring out what they want to work on or should work on week by week is probably new to them, because usually they get their assignments and they're everything ready to go. But now you're like, okay, what am I going to do this week? So that's going to be new to them. Obviously, like the tools for product management, whether it's GitHub projects, most like to use Jira, but it really depends. And also like merge conflicts, like Marielle said, that's going to be probably new to most. As far as the things that are kind of like bottlenecks, I've seen over the past year or two for teams that have already kind of gotten together ready and have had some initial meetings before practicum officially starts. Usually they're kind of good to go on a lot of aspects. They're kind of like up to speed, and they kind of start on, as soon as practicum starts officially, they just keep on going and they're really good. Ones that usually like haven't like really formed until practicum starts. Usually those are ones that usually start out really slow a lot of times, as far as getting their ideas, agreeing on their ideas, and understanding the whole process. So that's going to be like the first indicator of like, okay, like how is this team going to work? And where are the strengths and weaknesses? You'll find out pretty quickly within that week or two, like who's the introverts, who's the extroverts. So who is always like asking what to do next, giving good ideas, and the other students who are really quiet, don't really say anything. So obviously try to focus on those students and kind of picking them up and making sure they understand like what their role is and what they have to do, and giving them any additional support they may need. But usually those initial weeks is basically finalizing the idea for their project, their MVP, like what features they feel they can have. Just like Mariana said, a lot of times they think, oh, I can do this, but they really can do this. So saying, starting out small and then, having additional features being added as long as we can get this done in time. Obviously, like, finalizing on certain things like how the look and feel is going to be and things like that. Take a little time. What I also have seen that work really well is like usually in that first week or two, having the mentors do a demo on how merge conflicts happen. That's usually a good thing to do. Just creating like a little simple, maybe example repo somewhere and just doing a merge conflict and see how it is, because that always takes a couple tries. Just it takes everybody at least a couple tries, if not longer, to figure out how that process works and what's the screen that what part of it is being added and removed, and you know the green, the red, and everything else. So that always takes a lot for students to kind of be comfortable with. So definitely try to do a demo earlier with that. Um, and oh, also, it's not mentioned in the slides because I literally just decided to add it today because Acai is here. I didn't mention it in the student side, but I mentioned it because she's here. So I thought a cool idea for a couple of reasons. Um, but one of the reasons is that in the process of building an app, you need to create some sort of design, right? You know, and basically it'll be handled most of the time in teams by the front end people. But the front end people aren't necessarily going to be good at design or even know how to use Figma. So that's an additional like skill that usually one or two team members decide to to take on. But since even though we have a very small amount of people at Coda Dream that are UX designers, we do have one person who volunteered to help out a little bit. Now, a little bit, because we have 7 teams, we have one designer. This is on our own free time, so it's going to be limited. But we have Asiya, who's a UX apprentice, who is willing to help out. Again, I just decided today, so we're kind of figuring out as we go. But I was thinking of maybe she could help maybe one or two teams help out with like understanding Figma maybe, or maybe helping with the initial designs, things like that. So I'll reach out to what I usually do too is that I usually pop into the initial when most of the team's initial first week's meetings to see how it goes, and also I'll reach out to the mentors and see if there's any particular team that will need maybe some UX help, and then I can kind of follow up, with Asiya and see her availability for that. So it's like a new thing I'm literally just decided today I'm going to add in. I gave a little wild card, as Mary Alice didn't tell yet. But anyway, that's something else new. And then also with the crew prep, which we'll get to later, I'll talk about that. Sorry, I talked too much. Go on.
You're fine, Frank. Just keeping me on my
Okay.
toes. It's totally
Uh,
cool. Okay, nice. I'm glad to have Asiya aboard for design things. I'll be learning lots from you. You have a very good eye for design. Okay, cool. So tools used, I had mentioned about the classes at codethedream.org. Thank you for the 4 of you who let me know that you aren't in it yet. I think Reed just hadn't updated you on one area for me to be able to copy you over, so I will take care of that tonight. Our classes app, our Learns app updates every hour on the half hour. So it probably will not be in time for the 8:30 Eastern time, but by the 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, you should be able to have access. I do want to go ahead and give you a quick visual on it. That is not it. Hold on. I'm jumping the wrong screens here. Just so that way you can kind of see what it winds up looking like in case this is something that's new for you. You'll sign in with your GitHub account. You'll have a dashboard that'll show the Giraffe Grackle curriculum on there. You can click on that, or you can click on courses and select it. I'm in all of the courses, so that's why they're there. But the class calendar breaks it down as far as just a welcome page that gets them comfortable with what's going on. Sprint 1, and then these links take you to those individual sprint weeks. So, back end's focusing on data modeling and schema, front end's focusing on design and wireframing for that first week, for example. So you can go through the sprints to kind of get an idea of what teams should be focused on for each week throughout those 8 weeks of sprints. And then the career stuff that we were talking about are these weeks 9 and 10 to be able to see sort of what content that we'll be doing. They will have activities, so they'll work through and kind of think about and answer these questions and discuss these questions amongst each other, with you facilitating and or giving your experience of how this felt for you when you were going through it and that kind of thing. Okay, cool. Let me jump back to our slide. There we go. Okay, so classes, I just gave you a quick preview of that, and everybody should be good to go by 9:30 Eastern tonight. GitHub.com, we build that front and back end repo starter repositories for them that they will have to clone, not fork and clone, but clone to be able to be working with as they're updating and whatnot. If your team wants to use GitHub projects, that's totally fine. Just let us know so that way we can get all of that built out for you as well too. Slack's going to be the primary channel for collaboration. Each team has their own channel. If you want GitHub updates to hit your channel, that's fine too. Or if you want a secondary channel for your team, so that way it doesn't distract from the conversation, but they can still check that channel for pull request updates and merge updates and all that kind of stuff, then just let us know and we can get that going for you as well. We do have a spreadsheet that they can use for signing up for team Zoom time. This Zoom link that we're on right now is just a recurring meeting link, so they can jump in if they either need to work collaboratively front end or back end, if they need to hop on just to kind of pair program or work something out with somebody. And for team meetings, you're welcome to use it as well. We will be giving you the host key, so that way if multiple teams are joining at the same day and time, you can use the host key to do breakout rooms. And that way, you know, team A and team B will just be amongst themselves within their breakout rooms within the call. So it gives you some flexibility and you don't have to worry about using personal accounts for hosting sessions. You don't have to worry about 40-minute timeouts and stuff like that. Optional tools that your team might elect to use: Trello, Google Drive, Dropbox, Figma, Canva, Jira. I mean, the list is endless. If there are tools you've used or you've seen used commonly in the industry and you want to encourage your team to use it, that's totally fine. If your team already has something that they're comfortable using, that's totally fine too. Let us know if you need any additional support in getting comfortable with something that maybe you're not comfortable with. Like if you haven't used GitHub projects, we can help you find your way around and or get you resources that you need to get comfortable with what you're doing within that. Okie dokie. Roles and expectations. Students should be communicating regularly, attending group meetings. They should be working on their tickets and updating their tickets as they get things done. They should be supportive, encouraging, respectful of one another. We really want them to treat this as though it's a dress rehearsal for their first job. So they should approach it that way. If they are going to be MIA for a day or two because they're sick or they've got family stuff going on or whatever, they need to make sure that the team is aware of that and not just, you know, go off the radar or off the grid. We do estimate students should be spending about 10 to 20 hours a week of time on their practicum work. So if you see students using far less or using far more, then your team should have a conversation about that. Students have been encouraged to speak up if they fall into that category, so that way work can be more evenly distributed amongst team members. Your all's primary roles and expectations are attending the group's weekly meetings, being a reference source and being kind of the voice of experience, keep them from biting off more than they can chew. It's really important that you also set boundaries for yourself and encourage students to work independently or cooperatively first. It doesn't mean that you should always be slamming a door on a student, but it does mean that they shouldn't be coming at you every 5 minutes whenever they run into any kind of hiccup. That doesn't really help anybody. It burns you out and they don't learn to stand on their own 2 feet. So setting boundaries at the beginning is really helpful and important to say, hey, I've got a 2-hour block that will be my office hours that you can always hit me up. I will be online and available within that time frame or whatever. 2 hours is just an example. Do what makes sense for you. So that way they know, okay, it's okay if I haven't heard from my mentor for 24 hours. I know they're going to respond to me tomorrow. So setting those healthy boundaries is good for everybody. And then, of course, just supporting the students is the obvious one. We give them kind of this class flow example, but obviously it's going to be different for each team. Since some teams might be, you know, working parents, caregivers, working multiple shifts or multiple jobs, so they might have to tweak it as need be, but we just kind of give them this as a basic idea. So Monday through Friday, they should be regularly checking project management devices, updating those as they're working on tickets, work on any tasks, communicating with each other, having a daily scrum meeting. Typically, this is fine to do asynchronously, to be able to just let folks know, here's what I've done, here's what I'm doing, here's where I'm stuck, anything like that. And the meeting day that they agree on, everybody should be in attendance for that. If for some reason they're going to miss it, then they need to communicate that with the group in case you need or want to record so they can catch up, anything along those lines. Or there should be a note taker and then the person should review the notes, or however you want to work it. During that meeting day, each member should be updating as far as what they've done, work together on any problems. It's a great opportunity to take a look at any merge conflicts at that point in time, as long as it's not, you know, hanging up their progress by waiting until your meeting day to work on that. Make any alterations needed. So if something's taking way longer for somebody, have a second person help them out. If somebody was done way early and needs more work shifted their way, kind of get that plan together and review the plan for the week so everybody's on the same page. Weekends, continue work on tasks if that's kind of how their schedule is flowing. But throughout the whole process, and they should be focusing on their own personal goals and working on their team building skills. Not team building skills, building their team skills. There we go. They don't have to be team builders. They just have to be good members of a team. All right. So at the end of practicum, well, really at the end of the first 8 weeks when they're done with the project part and before they dive into the career prep things, then they will complete a self-evaluation form on themselves to say, this is what I'd like to do next. Apply for apprenticeship, look for jobs, take another class with you all, whatever the case may be. And that's also how they would apply to the apprenticeship, is through that self-evaluation form. They also evaluate their peers and kind of say, hey, they did great at this, they should strengthen this, kind of a feedback, since they're able to observe what people are doing within their group and can have valuable insights that might help one another. During that time, you all will also be asked to complete an evaluation form on each of the students that was in your group. This isn't going to make or break their career by any means. So be open, be honest. We use any feedback to be able to help them grow. And it's, constructive criticism provided to them so that way they know how to make themselves more marketable on the job market and or what they need to improve before they be a solid apprentice candidate. But highlighting those things as well as identifying, yeah, they'd benefit more from taking a second practicum or taking another course or building their technical skills, or yeah, this was cake for them. They can definitely be considered for apprenticeship. It helps give us insights as far as how did they perform with it in a team and where their technical skill level's at. So on that form, you'll indicate if they seem like they're prepared to apprentice with CTD Labs. Whether or not they apply, that still helps us gauge sort of where their job readiness level is at. Any questions up to this point? I know Frank and I have been talking a lot.
Just like Mariana said, the evaluation that you give them, that's part of the process of how we evaluate students, whether we're going to. So basically, the process is that we get all the applicants that want to be apprentices. They first take a coding assessment, and then based upon what they do in the coding assessment, plus your evaluations, then we decide whether we take a subset of that initial applications and do interviews. And then from the interviews, we decide on who we actually will be deciding to hire as apprentices.
Quick question. So just to be clear, the work that they're pushing, like they're going to be creating PRs, we're going to be reviewing those, but we also want to encourage them to do peer reviews on themselves before we finally review it, or what's like, I kind of,
Yeah, so
yeah,
so like each team will decide, okay, well, how many reviews each PR needs, and then who will do it. So usually I've seen teams where it has to be like, a one student review and one mentor review. Or it could be 2 student reviews and 1 mentor review, and then it gets, merged. So you'll decide, like, with the other mentors on the team, like how many reviews, and should it be 1 student reviewing it plus a mentor, or 2? But yeah, it should be the students should get opportunities to review other students' PRs, but usually the mentor makes like the final, decision on whether it's okay, good to go. But yeah, students should be reviewing their own PRs in addition to mentors.
I have another question. What is typically the role of a mentor during the weekly meetings? Are we mostly just there like on support? Is it expected that we're leading the meetings, or do people usually have like a project manager that leads? Or
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
Yeah, like it really depends on the team. Sometimes you'll have some, so each team you'll have your collection of extroverts and introverts. So the extroverts sometimes will take the lead of like, I'm going to run, or I'm going to partially be like the product manager. it just really it depends on the personality of the team. Some teams say, okay, who wants to be the product manager, and the mentor will choose a student to be that. Or if no one really wants to, or maybe the personalities don't feel like they want to, then the mentor will be. So you kind of have to gauge the team in that first meeting or two to see like who's going to be like more active and not active, and who wants to like do certain things. And again, I've seen some teams, it's the mentors are kind of sort of passive, and we let the team run it most of it. Other times, the mentor is really active and like runs each week like a stand up, and assigns tasks. Each creates the task, assigns them. I would say it's really kind of go for a happy medium. Is where I would say creating some initial tasks to do, and then saying, hey, what else do you want to work on? And then kind of giving like a little bit and seeing how much they take it. And then kind of seeing that first week, second week, if they can do more responsibilities, give them more. If they kind of like don't feel like they can, then you kind of be a little more active. I'm kind of on the side of just being more active at first, and seeing if they like want to be active too, and then see how it works.
Thank you.
Sure.
Those were great questions, Eli. Thank you for asking those. Other questions before we move on?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to know if Code the Dream offers any licensing to any tools that students can utilize, or will this be more just like making use of like open source tools to help them develop? Or yeah, I just wanted to. I know there was someone earlier said that there's a designer that is a volunteer that could act as a resource, but are there any other tools that Code the Dream offers that students can leverage?
Frank, you want to take that one or me?
I don't think we do we? We don't have any licensing.
I don't think
for
so.
anything.
Yeah, most of the things we do are just open source or free resources.
Free trial.
Yeah, or free trial kind of a situation. If there is something that the team is excited about using, or if there's something that you find would be valuable that you want them to at least get exposure to, and you need or want me to dig into that and see if they have like a nonprofit option that we can kick over to them or anything like that, just let me know. In general, if it's not a free option, I usually get the door slammed on me when I say, hey, could we? Just because as a nonprofit, budget can be tight. But feel free to holler at me and I can dig a little bit for you.
But generally, most of the tools are having some free versions to get learn, and a student can use it. I have found everywhere, like if you want to learn and not to use for commercial purposes, you can create account and practice it on it.
Yes, yeah, and it just kind of depends. Like recently, our Ruby on Rails class was asking about using JetBrains, and so it's like, well, that actually does come with a price tag for us, kind of a thing, or at least it comes with a price tag to the student beyond the first, 6-month free trial kind of a situation.
JetBrains also has a free version actually.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
I think they were looking for the advanced one because it has a couple of things for Ruby that
I don't
would have
think
been helpful.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Where can we see our teams? How many people are there in our team, and meet them?
Yeah, I'll be adding you all to team channels by the end of the weekend. So teams were supposed to have decided on a day and time for when their meeting was going to be. The first step is usually them figuring out across their time zones and whatnot, what day and time will students all be available for a single hour throughout the course of the week. So once they've nailed that down, which they have until Friday at noon, I think was the deadline that I gave them to determine that, then I'll be sharing that information with any mentors that aren't currently assigned to a team. So that way you can say, oh yeah, I am always free on Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern. Go ahead and put me with them. Or, the team that has a Saturday morning is perfect for me or whatever. So once I have those finalized days and times from teams, then I'll be sharing that to see what your all's availability is so I can connect you with the team where all of your availabilities align.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pradeep. Any other questions before moving along? Cool. All right. So as we mentioned for the repositories, each team's going to have 2 repositories, front end, back end. You all will be admins on those accounts, but students should be observing whenever you're doing merge conflict resolution. They should have an understanding of like what the process is that's happening there. So within your group meetings, talk about why you have decided, or why the team has decided to have 2 student peer reviews before it can be merged, or admin approval before it can be merged, so that way they can understand why is it like that, what's the benefit of having it like that, and so they can understand how it's happening as well too. For those of you that have mentored with the classes, especially if you've mentored with the Node class or with older React classes with our program, students within the class process usually clone a repository and then, fork a repository and then clone their fork. So that way it keeps the original content, clean, and then they can manipulate their copy of it as needed. But in this instance, they will not be forking. They need to go ahead and clone it directly. So in this very first, week or 2, as people are getting set up and getting comfortable and, kind of getting that environment situation taken care of, make sure that everybody's cloning and not forking and then cloning their fork. And then regardless, whether it was in class or not, we always encourage them to do work on separate branches, just because that's good workflow, good process. So just make sure that they are remembering branch off before you start doing your work, and to make sure that they're updating their content so that they're not merging back an old version with their pull request. And those are the biggest sort of process things that you usually have to kind of highlight and remind about.
Mary, one
Yeah.
question. Are mentors also approving the merges from students and verifying the code? And also, is there something about testing as well?
Frank, I'm going to let you handle that one.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, we want students to kind of review PRs, but mentors will be like doing the final like approval and merging into dev or prod. As far as like testing, so like testing their branches beforehand, whoever's doing the PR will be testing their branch before giving approval. And as far as like if you want to add tests in that case, as part of like like some of the functionality, you could do that too, depending if you have time.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank.
Answers the
Also,
question.
that brings me to another question. Have teams already decided their projects, or it's something that mentors and the team will meet and discuss what projects they want to work on?
Some have, some haven't. So we started sort of social mixers so that way students could decide who they wanted to work in a team with. Not all teams were ones where they have selected who their 5 or 6 are. Some of them, it was, I know I want to work with this one person, but I don't care who else I work with. So some teams are sort of a collaboration, or let's throw these people together because they have common availabilities and see how this goes. And some are students that are like, oh yeah, we know each other through class and we want to work together as a team. For some groups, they might have already started that brainstorming process and kind of laid the groundwork a little bit. For ones that they are newly formed because they didn't care who they were with, or they never networked to the same degree to be able to make connections with other students to form that team, then they will likely be at the starting gate and need help as far as brainstorming, narrowing down their options, and deciding ultimately what they're going to wind up doing.
But yeah, just like Mara said, I think some teams have thought of ideas but not finalized, and some haven't done anything yet, so just forming. They'll probably want to come to you to like, if they haven't, like, hey, if they've already decided, they probably, should come to you and say, hey, what do you think? As far as like, like the MVP level of like functionality, like, and then you'll be like saying, okay, I like the idea. I like the MVP. It's all good. Or I like the idea, but, you want to scale back a little bit, like Mary has mentioned. So that would be kind of things that the mentor would normally do, apart from, if they need help in deciding of ideas or narrowing it down.
Perfect. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Mary.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just highlighting about the career prep weeks a little bit, since this is new for those of you that are returning practicum mentors, and it's just new in general because it's the first time we're doing it. So those final 2 weeks, weeks 9 and 10, are going to be where they're focusing on getting themselves ready for job exploration. The first week is mindset focused, you know, how to keep yourself from getting discouraged during the whole application process, and how to keep yourself motivated and engaged to network, to have a successful application experience. Preceding that, so weeks 7 and 8 is when you'll be working on the team evaluations, getting those things squared away and turned into us. At the end of week 8, on that September 13th in the evening, is when they'll be demoing their projects. And then weeks 9 and 10 during your regular weekly meeting, rather than looking at code and, you know, organizing yourselves for the upcoming sprint or for the upcoming week or whatever, then you'll be discussing those career questions and those topics and those activities that are outlined for those weeks. We do need you there to be attending and participating in those discussions. Frank will have a everybody in practicum meeting once a week for weeks 9 and 10. But them having that opportunity to meet just within their groups with you all first and kind of talk through those things will help enrich that everybody in practicum meeting that they have that week. Sorry, go ahead, Frank. Yeah.
I'll probably have that weekly group meeting probably towards the end of the week. So maybe like Thursday, Friday. So if you have your normal meetings like earlier in the week, or you want to have, you know, just for those 2 weeks, like earlier in the week, maybe, just so like you can discuss it within your team, and then later in the week we can kind of have a similar discussion through all the teams, and then kind of just, you know, share information and any other questions that may come up. I can help answer. I think that would work pretty well. And then, just like Marilyn said, the first week, which is week 9. It's just kind of like getting a feel for what they want to do, like, you know, front end, back end, like how confident do they feel technically. That's kind of like the main theme of the first week, getting them like thinking about like what to do next. Again, like some students go to other classes, some like, hey, I need to start looking for a job, you know, beyond just apprenticeship. And then week 10, it gets a little more meaty, and it gets into like the concepts of like building out your resume, what's important on your resume, your LinkedIn, types of interviews, some sample questions of like different types of interviews, things like that. We won't have time to do like mock interviews or anything else, unless you want to do that, but that's way beyond the scope of what our expectations are. Again, it's just kind of at the end of when you look at the curriculum, and again, that curriculum could change a little bit because I just wrote it, and, you know, but we'll kind of, they'll grow as we do other practicums in the future. But there's like at the end of week 9, week 10, there's like questions and little activities to discuss within your group. If you're like, hey, it'd be cool if you had this or this, you know, come to me and say, hey, here's some ideas for those weeks that aren't in there, or you can tweak them. I can tweak them wherever you want, because that will be kind of, you know, changing those, you know, as we feel how useful or not as useful they are to students going forward in practicum.
And if you wind up with a team that has inflexibility as far as pushing weeks 9 and 10 group meetings earlier in the week, then I would definitely encourage and foster communication discussion within your team channel about those topics prior to the Thursday, Friday group meeting with Frank. And then if they're still meeting on like a Friday night after, or, you know, a Saturday morning or something along those lines, then you can have that serve as like a retrospective as far as, you know, what did you all learn from that group meeting with Frank? And let's talk about the things that you all discussed in your Slack channel. So you do have some options just in case you wind up running into time weirdness, because that always happens when you have more than one person's schedule that you're having to coordinate and work with. Questions about career prep stuff that need answered? All right, so hitting some important takeaways before we wrap up for any final questions. Schedule, office hours. Students can feel a lot of pressure because they're getting towards the end of the program portion, and they might be staring down the barrel of potentially getting an apprenticeship. So they can feel like there's a lot of pressure on them at that point in time, especially. So boundaries are going to be very key to make sure that students are clear on what they can expect from you, and that you are clear with students as far as this is how much I can give. So don't burn yourselves out. Set those boundaries early, be very clear, be consistent. It's okay to tell students that I'm not available to help with this. So if for some reason you are a little murky with those boundaries, or if students are just that frazzled and stressed that they are kind of pushing the envelope to see, if I get an inch, can I also get a mile? Then it's totally okay to say, I'm not available to help with this, but you should be giving them an alternative as a backup. Like, you need to contact the other mentor because that's a React thing and I'm a Node person or whatever. Or reach out to this teammate. I know that they have done such and such recently. They'll be able to help answer your questions or give you clarity on the code they built that you're now having to work with, or anything along those lines. Or even just checking out resources that you've used. So rather than having to handhold an instructor or anything, then you can say, this was a valuable resource. It really helped me figure things out. Here you go. And let them absorb that on their own. Teams that have a strong front or back, or that have strong individuals, you can encourage students to take on a little more, like Frank was mentioning earlier, as far as giving them some more responsibility, as far as like leading meetings, note taking, sort of serving as a little bit of like a leader within their end or a leader within the group to be checking code, or doing a little more with testing or anything along those lines. So that's totally okay to do, is find the squeaky wheels and give them a little extra grease as appropriate. Or if there are students that are just extra strong, then they should be giving support to their teammates to help raise their teammates up as well too. Because as a team, you're only as strong as your weakest link, I think is the cliche or whatever. So why not fortify any weak links, right? Why not? Okay, and then oh, that's my last slide. Okay, I thought I had one more after that, but we hit all the highlights. Nice. So questions, discussion, anything anybody wants to bring to the table?
Another quick question. The weekly meetings, is I know the students are tasked with like choosing the time that works for them. Do we want to maintain that schedule on a weekly basis, or does it change, for whatever reason?
Ideally, it should maintain from week to week, just like, you would have a standard, staff meeting or whatever in a job. So it should mimic that. But if flexibility needs to happen, and if you have flexibility, then be sure that you're communicating that with students. So if, 1 week Tuesdays are great, but the next week everybody's better off having it on a Thursday night, that's totally fine to do. As long as it works for you as well too. So just make sure that you're communicating with them and they know you can change the meeting time, but I won't be there. So you need to find a time that works for me too.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
so like the meetings, there's usually like as Mary posted, I think earlier, you always have at least one group meeting, but then you can have multiple like other meetings for like just the front end team and the back end team, or that could be led by just like a student lead for the front end, student lead for the back end, and the mentor doesn't be available. Again, you can have at least 2 mentors per team. So you can say, okay, well, decide amongst yourselves, like, okay, I can meet for the group and you can meet for the front end or back end. So, you don't necessarily have to have both mentors. Sometimes we have 3 mentors actually on some teams. So like you can decide, okay, well, me and you will go for the group meetings, or me and you will go for the front and back end, and we'll have somebody else, if a third mentor will go for the, weekly. So you just have amongst yourselves, when you can meet, that you don't have to have all the mentors meeting for every meeting each week. You could just, as long as you have one mentor there, that's the most important thing. But again, like Mariella said, you try to keep it consistent, because I've noticed if you don't and it changes each week, there's gonna be 1 or 2 students like, when was that again? Is it this week is going to be Tuesdays and the next week is going to be Wednesdays? That always leads to confusion. So if you can, unless it's like, they have some crazy schedules, or you can work out among the other mentors, try to keep it the same each week, at least the group meeting. And then if that front or back end has to change, then, you'll have to change, We try to be consistent as much as you can. And then, so that'll be like a weekly meeting. I know some teams have done like daily stand-ups where they're not actually there synchronously, but they do like you put something in Slack, hey, tell me what you're working on today. I know some mentors have done that in different teams, where the mentor will post daily stand-up post, and each person will say what they're working on, if they can do that. If someone's available, every day, that sometimes makes it a little like in between weekly meetings or front end meetings, if it's a couple days in between or more, it kind of keeps people like understanding like what people are working on a regular basis, because they keep working on something one day, and then 2 days later they're done. Then like they're waiting, or they're waiting for someone else to finish to work on their ticket. Because all these tickets, a lot of times, there's a domino effect. One has to get done before another one can be done sometimes. So sometimes you can do that where you just post stuff for daily stand-up for async, and then your meetings would be like synchronous.
Anything anybody's nervous about? You just want to be like, I'm nervous about such and such, so we can help assuage any anxiety. It's pretty fun.
So if you're not nervous, something's wrong with you. So I'm sure everybody's a little nervous.
Frank.
If you're not nervous, if you're not nervous at all, you've never done this before, probably something's a little wrong with you. So like, I mean, everybody's
No,
gonna be
it
nervous.
means they need to teach us their like Zen Yoda skills.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah. So yeah, it's no big deal. I mean, it's even if you've been part of engineering teams for years, this is still going to be a little bit new, especially for you're probably used to managing engineering teams that are like junior, mid, seniors. So there's a lot of things that you assume they know and they don't know. So that's the thing that always comes up. Like, oh, they should know that. Like, oh, wait a second, these are students. These aren't actual engineers yet, or the engineers that I usually worked at and where I work at or have worked at. So that's usually the thing that kind of like you get a little nervous, like what should I assume? What should I not assume? Usually you assume nothing. So you always like make sure no one knows anything. And that's usually the safest, but sometimes I always think it takes the most time. So, you kind of do that gauge in that first week or two of where all your students at. Some teams may have mostly advanced students. They're just plugging along. Some you have to hold their hand more. It really just depends.
Everybody's quiet tonight. It's because it's the middle of the week. Students were quiet tonight too on orientation. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we can go ahead and end the meeting. If there are things that you think of, things that you need between now and the official start on Monday, reach out to us. Frank and I are available if there are things that you need. For those of you that had let me know that you weren't getting access to the Learns app, I'll have that ready for you within the hour. And yeah, that is the highlights.
Oh, I'll be here only like 2 days next week. It's my birthday week. But other than that, I'll be here almost every day after that.
Nice. Party it up, Frank.
I'll try. I'll try.
And I'm just always here. So I might be a little slow to respond if my kid is sick yet again, because I have a 4-year-old that just started daycare this year. So he's sick like every other week, but I will get back to you within 24 hours at the longest. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Reach out if you need anything.
Thank you.